The community is in an uproar, and for good reason, after the latest developer's stream. It's critical to state up front that these are not final patch notes. They are proposals and ideas the developers discussed, and nobody knows exactly what the final public test build will look like. For all we know, they could be hiding a suite of killer buffs they haven't told us about, though that would be a crazy way to manage community expectations. But I felt it was important to point that out very clearly at the beginning of this video. Still, the proposed changes they did share feel less like a balance patch and more like a declaration of war on an entire playstyle. Forums are on fire, creators are fuming, and just about everyone agrees. From what we've been told, this is one of the most one-sided patches we've ever seen. On the surface, it looks like a colossal mistake, a complete misunderstanding of how the game is played, and honestly, I think that's pretty close to what it is. But it's a mistake with a specific cause. I doubt behavior wanted to make people this angry over these potentially unbalanced changes. It seems to be the result of a dev team that has stopped balancing based on gameplay and started balancing based on spreadsheets. Stay with me, there's a lot of people talking about these changes right now, but this goes much deeper than just another rant. We need to look past the outrage and ask a more critical question. Why would they propose something so obviously one-sided? The answer, I believe, lies in a design philosophy that is fundamentally out of touch. And I think it's a design philosophy that answers that what side is behavior on question, that question that always sparks so much debate. Their goal likely isn't to make the game worse, although that is sometimes what it feels like. They're just trying to fix numbers on a chart. Behavior is a company. They're looking at things like uninstallation feedback and player frustration metrics, and they're using a sledgehammer to fix them, with no regard for the ripples it creates. We're essentially the guinea pigs for a flawed, data-obsessed balancing strategy. Before we dive deeper, I want to give a massive thank you to my amazing channel members for their incredible generosity. It's important for you all to know that they're donating to a truly wonderful cause, as 100% of all membership income is donated directly to the local animal shelters I work with. A huge shout out to my Tier 1 members Polo, Jay Reynolds, Peter RJ, Evil Cherub, and our newest Tier 1 member, Bloodshot. And of course, a huge thank you to my Tier 2 members Kilnak, In Cairo, Winnison, Foxrocks, ZSD, Crazy Creeper, Mirasteer, and Eden. Thank you all so much for your contributions, and if you would like to be added to this list of amazing donors and help animals in need, consider joining the channel members today. Before we get into the new philosophy, let's lay the groundwork and talk about why everyone is so rightfully upset. The changes discussed for the upcoming PTB are aimed squarely at 3 core strategies: slugging, tunneling, and camping. Now, with ideas like slugging and tunneling, I can see them as being potentially problematic. However, face camping was fixed before and I almost never see it now, so I wouldn't really consider that worth addressing further. The real problem is that fixing just these issues without addressing why people use these tactics is very unhealthy game design. These aren't just tweaks, they're shifts aimed squarely at the killer's most fundamental tools, without any regard for why these tools are implemented in the first place. First, the death of slugging. The proposed system goes beyond discouraging it, it aims to remove it entirely. They're making another attempt at introducing a resolve bar. Once a survivor is on the ground for a cumulative 120 seconds, they can pick themselves up. The core issue is that they only need to fill this bar once to unlock this ability for the entire match, a permanent 5th perk. This has led many to argue the bar should reset after each use. While the devs seem to have good intentions here, similar to most of the other changes they made, it ignores the core flaws that it would introduce with the aim of keeping more newer players around. This will create a perverse incentive for survivors to get downed, crawl to a corner, and wait for their new power. There's no downside. Either the killer wastes time finding them and hooks them anyways, or they get a permanent buff. This makes going for a pickup on a downed survivor a strategically terrible decision. Barring some extremely specific circumstances, it'll never be the right decision to go for a pickup. The only lesson is to stick to gens and wait, because your teammate will get up on their own and be stronger for it. Next up is tunneling. To address this, unhooked survivors are getting a whole suite of buffs. Endurance, haste, 10 seconds of the killer's aura read within 32 meters, plus an elusive status and the power-specific muting for things like puking. Important to point out here, it looks like they're upping the endurance effect to 30 seconds from the now base kit 10, which is pretty insane to me. My knee-jerk reaction is that this might be a bit much considering coordinated squads exist, but that's the difficult balance position the devs are in with every change. I do think it's a bit over-tweaked, but that's specifically on how it can be used aggressively, which we're about to go into detail on. On the killer's side, they get Bloodlust and extra blood points for unique hooks, which is a good direction but feels painfully lackluster. We want to see buffs and not nerfs when it comes to fixing tunneling and slugging. However, these changes are just not anything. It's going to be not impactful at all. And like I said, increasing the base kit borrowed time length to 30 seconds is absolutely insane. It's going to be used so aggressively that in most cases, it will force a tunnel just to deal with the invulnerable body blocking. It's pretty funny, actually. The devs already added back Survivor Collision because it was being used aggressively during the last PTB, which some of us predicted even while bigger creators were saying there was no way that would happen. It turned out to be pretty easy for survivors to abuse the buffs that they were given. Survivors will use the tools they're given, and I don't fault them for this. Play with the advantages you can. But if a survivor uses their anti-tunneling mechanics aggressively, resulting in the killer being forced to tunnel, will behavior's precious stats show that tunneling is still too high, resulting in more buffs? And finally, camping. The anti-face camp meter, already in a decent place to combat literal face camping, is getting pretty well charged up. The resolve bar acts as a free mini kindred. While it lacks the powerful aura, it still gives some information and will surely add fuel to the devs favor X side fire. The idea of the bar filling faster the longer a killer is in the area is neat, but we need to see how it's implemented. I really don't have enough information to go off of right now to form an educated opinion. If it's measured as time without leaving the immediate area, it could be a good thing that would really help hinder face camping in general. If it's seen as total time in that area, it could be a clumsy and punishing mechanic. But the real kicker is the increased range of the anti-face camp radius to 20 meters. Face camp radius, 20 meters. Okay. In my opinion, that really sucks. Let's be clear, at 20 meters, that's not anti-face camping, that's anti-proxy camping. It's anti-playing your objective. At first glance, without the final numbers, this range increase makes it impossible for low mobility killers to defend a hook and patrol a nearby generator without being penalized, especially on maps with tight objective layouts. Now, faced with all that, the immediate reaction is to assume incompetence or to believe the balance team is hopelessly biased. That's the easy answer. But my core argument is this: behavior isn't inherently survivor-sided, they are data-sided. And survivors simply provide the bulk of that data, being the 4 in the 4v1 equation. I do understand why they want to target slugging and tunneling, as it can be very unfun for the largest part of their audience, the casual survivor. However, these issues can't be looked at in a vacuum. They must be addressed with other killer buffs, or the already bad state for non-S tier killers will only get worse. Killers already have it rough if they don't play top tier characters, which is why everyone is seeing nothing but Blight and friends recently. After the insane pallet density quote-unquote quality of life change and the crazy state of generator speeds, these one-sided changes are terrible for the game's health. This is a tangent, but it's also insane to me how they mention nothing about the quality of life palette density update in their dev stream, but okay. This seems to be part of a philosophy that avoids teaching players, choosing instead to hold their hands. Instead of teaching a new player why they shouldn't heal under a hook or that the unhooker should take the aggro, you're just removing the punishing consequences of these mistakes. It's a philosophy that seems dangerously out of touch with one side of their game, best exemplified by a comment on their dev stream. They referred to the killer's incentive for unique hooks as quote-unquote handholding, an insane description for a mechanic meant to counteract a tidal wave of survivor buffs. In general, it feels like this philosophy has carried forward to this developer's stream, as the killers have received basically nothing that we've seen for these proposed changes. Why would any developer intentionally propose something so chaotic? The motive appears to be a desperation to fix top-level performance indicators. Think about managing a live service game. You have metrics for everything: player retention, daily active users, post-match survey results, etc., etc. When a spreadsheet shows that X% of players who uninstall do so after a match where they were slugged or tunneled, that becomes a high-priority problem. Finding a nuanced, healthy middle ground doesn't seem to be the goal. The goal is to make that bad number on a spreadsheet go down. So when gentle nudges fail or aren't fast enough, what do you do if you're a data-driven designer? You use a sledgehammer. Instead of just nerfing slugging, you propose a system that makes it impossible as a strategy, because that will definitely solve the quote-unquote player frustration from slugging metric. Instead of discouraging tunneling, you make the unhooked survivor a god for 30 seconds to force the quote-unquote tunneling complaints metric down. This PTB is the result of that thinking. If a killer's kill rate plummets, that's a secondary concern. The primary goal is to see if these extreme changes reduce the quantifiable frustration events. Behavior made sure to say multiple times that the PTB is for testing and that we shouldn't get angry at their proposed PTB changes. But the reason people are getting so fed up with the changes in these PTBs is because they are showing a very clear pattern of thinking. Nobody has faith in behavior anymore, and we see PTBs as a premonition of the future. By now, we all know that behavior balances for statistics instead of the game's health, and that's what's worrying. Let's look at their changes again through this spreadsheet solution lens. They stop looking like random survivor buffs and start looking like brute force answers to specific data problems. Solution number 1, the slugging self-pickup. The spreadsheet says players are frustrated by being slugged and not getting to play. The solution on paper gives players a tool to make prolonged slugging impossible. This directly addresses the data point, ignoring what this does to killers like Oni or the twins. Solution number 2, the 30-second God mode. Here, the data is particularly suspect. Behavior has claimed that a survivor gets tunneled 40% of the time, which makes me seriously question their definition of tunneling. Apparently, they also question their own definition of tunneling. Their raw data obviously doesn't factor in when a tunnel is necessary or when survivors aggressively use anti-tunnel mechanics. It seems their definition is simply a survivor being hooked multiple times in a row. Based on this questionable data, the spreadsheet solution is make the survivor immune for an absurdly long time, to force the metric down without addressing the nuance. Their third solution, the 20-meter safe zone. Players complain about face camping. This is a source of some negative feedback, I suppose, even though I don't see it. Spreadsheet solution, create an enormous no-go zone for the killer around the hook. This is a simple, quantifiable change that ignores the tactical implications of map control on places like the game, RPD, or Midwich. Those maps are so compressed you sometimes can't get away from a hooked survivor even if you tried. Especially on RPD, where it's so easy to pre-run that you have to protect a good strong hook to win. Their fourth solution, and a change we haven't discussed yet, is their map rotations. The spreadsheet logically extends beyond gameplay. Behavior announced that they will be weighing popular maps higher so you get them more often based on survey results. But in a 4 versus 1 game, of course the surveys will always be skewed towards the larger part of the player base, as it's the 4-person role. Survivor-sided maps will naturally be voted as more popular. This isn't balance, it's letting the majority data dictate map rotation, which is a nuts decision. The idea of no repeated maps is solid, but weighing maps differently is just dumb in my opinion. So, are they just out of touch? Yes, but in a very specific, modern way. The irony is, they don't seem out of touch with players' complaints. They seem hyper-focused on them to the point of obsession. What they're out of touch with is the game itself. This is especially clear in their language. I've noticed behavior often uses self words like you, I, and we when referencing the survivor experience, which is a little scary. Even a small creator like me tries to analyze both sides independently, but it seems to slip out more often than not when behavior is talking about balance changes. These changes aren't just incompetence either, it's the predictable outcome of a system that trusts its data more than its own gameplay instincts. This is proof that the squeaky wheel gets the grease at behavior, and the survivors, being the majority, squeak the loudest. Their complaints drown out killer feedback in surveys and datasets, and I really don't think behavior is adequately weighing killer feedback, as in multiplying it by 4 to account for the lower player count. By balancing around spreadsheets, the game will end up leaning even more towards survivors having a relaxed game and getting results, versus a killer needing to employ the most unfun strategies possible just to secure a victory. If we keep going down this road, I expect the killer role will become so frustrating that players will either quit or move to primarily play Survivor, just like I've been doing recently. That'll push queue times through the roof, and the game will fizzle out as a result. It may never die because this is Dead by Daylight, but it won't be the same. As someone who covers asymmetrical games as a genre on this channel, I've dissected many failed asyms, and this is a pattern we see over and over again. Different developers balance for the feedback they're getting, not accounting that feedback is being skewed towards the bigger number in the 4 versus 1 formula. One of the biggest and most accurate examples is VHS, or Video Horror Society. VHS addressed the squeaky wheel. Teens got weapons to fight back. They were impossible to slug in camp, and the game died. The teen role was so fun, so relaxed that nobody wanted to play the power role, so matches couldn't happen. It doesn't matter what feedback you're listening to if the game can't be played. That'll kill player retention more than anything. Now, you could argue that if these changes go to live and killer player count and kill rates tank, behavior will eventually have to react. They'll see the data, the queue times will skyrocket, and they'll be forced to implement a fix. But that's where my faith wavers for two primary reasons. First, I don't have a lot of faith that they would react well. Based on their current spreadsheet solution mindset, their fix would likely be another clumsy, over-the-top buff that breaks something else, rather than a nuanced adjustment. Second, and more importantly, I don't have faith that they would react in time before the game takes a huge dive. By the time the metrics are bad enough for them to act, a significant portion of the killer player base might already be gone for good, off to the next ASIM game or doing something less stressful, sending the game into a spiral it can't easily pull out of. We can't forget that the game is and has been in a really bad spot recently. Behavior makes fumble after fumble that doesn't get fixed, we just get distracted by their next mistake. This is a formula that isn't built to last, and most everybody that knows the game sees it as no small miracle that Dead by Daylight survived as long as it has. I hope I'm wrong, but I see no end to the negativity people have with Dead by Daylight in the future. In fact, the negativity we've been seeing might just be the beginning, or if you're cynical, the beginning of the end. So where does this leave us? In my opinion, we're test subjects for a balancing philosophy that sees us as data points. This awful patch seems to be yet another test, designed to see if brute force changes can move internal metrics. We know these ideas aren't going away. They're being dragged back from PTB 9.2.0 back into PTB 9.3.0. As someone who plays both sides, I can see why many survivors will be thrilled. But as someone with more hours on Killer, I can see how this will hurt the entire community. I have a bad feeling we'll see a lot more quote-unquote DBD is dying videos for a while. This brings me to my true point. What are we willing to put up with for the promise of a better game? Can we, as a community, endure months of a one-sided patch so the behavior can look at their precious stats and finally see the game for what we all see it as? The community outrage is likely a predictable reaction they're willing to endure, as long as their charts trend positively. Is a game balanced by spreadsheets and uninstallation feedback even a game that we want to play in the long run? The outcome is uncertain, but the method is clear. They're willing to break the game's balance to fix their charts. So my question to you is this: are you okay with being one of their guinea pigs? Do you believe this chaos is a clumsy but necessary step towards a better game, or a sign that the developers are chasing the wrong goals? Let me know down in the comments. I really value your opinions. And as always, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the fog.